Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kendria Mitchell, and I'm project manager here at Benefitsolver. We're really excited to bring you today's first training for the local group, so all of you local governments, municipalities on the line today. So today's session will be mostly led by Dave Florence and Pawn Johnson. Myself, Athena, and Sam will be acting as your moderators for today. We really do expect that today's session is interactive, so feel free to ask us questions out in the questions box, and we'll get back to you guys as we can. If you want to send us a private message in the chat, that's also fine. If there is any questions that we can't get to immediately, we will be sure to connect with you all after today's session. The sessions will also be recorded in the event that you need to leave early. And then there is also a session tomorrow, which is going to be the same content. If you would like to join that session, feel free to get registered and come back. So with that, I will turn over the day to Dave and Pawn to get you all into Benefitsolver.
Thank you very much, Kendria. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. You might have to send it to me. My share screen button's not working yet. Thank you. I see it now. Okay. And Pawn, if you're still there, will you just confirm you can see my screen okay?
I can now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hey guys, thanks for coming back. It's good to see everybody again, and I appreciate you making time to take today's training session. You may recall that we're in the middle, or actually towards the end now, of our three-phase training program. It began with an overview session, and hopefully everyone was able to attend one of our overview sessions. If not, they're recorded. You can still go check them out. And in that session, we asked you to go in and complete an online training course in basic navigation within the Benefitsolver platform. I trust everybody took a few minutes to go take that course. If not, there's still an opportunity for you to do that after today's session. And I think you'll still be able to follow along and get a lot of great information out of our session today, which is our system training session. Now, when you take that basic navigation course, it is a general course that applies equally to all administrators within the Benefitsolver platform. What we want to do in today's session is look at tasks that are specific to you as a certifying officer or administrator within the state of New Jersey, and the work that you will be doing in the Benefitsolver platform. So we want to really custom fit this down to the things that you'll need to know and be able to do. So let's just dive right in. I've got some great stuff to show you. I want to start by showing you how to add an employee into the Benefitsolver system. Now, bear in mind that for most of you, the employees will already be present in there, so it's not like you've got to start from scratch. If an employee has already had an interaction with state benefits, whether it was waived coverage or elected coverage, they should already be loaded. But on an ongoing basis, you'll want to have this skill ready to go, and it's really easy. We're going to go to Employees and Add Employee. In the interface that comes up, just a quick note, I'm in one of our test environments, a lower environment. I'm in the UA2 test area. And as such, it's just slightly different. You see the wallpaper on the back that says UA2. At the top, you'll see a Generate Test Member button. You won't have those in the real production environment. And as I go through, I'll be entering a fictional employee. So all the stuff that you see today is there won't be real people, real protected health information or personally identifying information. It's all going to be fictional. And just a quick note, if you're wanting to follow along, I'm afraid you won't be able to just yet. When the system goes live on June 1st, that's when you'll have access to be able to come in and do these things hands-on and be able to see them firsthand. For today, I'm going to have to ask you just to follow along and watch as I do these things in the system. Let's begin by adding an employee, and I'm just going to pick a fictional employee named Roy and give him a last name ZZ Test. You'll notice the red asterisk next to each required field. If you have additional information, hey, go ahead and put that stuff in here. But if you don't have the extra additional information, that's okay. You only really need the ones with a red asterisk. Date of birth, I'm just going to enter, again, all fictional information. address 1, I'm going to make one up. Okay. Not Trenton, New Hampshire. That was close, not quite. LM, New Jersey, and okay. If you have that email address information, hey, that's great. Go ahead and get that stuff in there. But otherwise, as employees go in and begin using the Benefitsolver system, we'll begin collecting their email address information so that when we have transactions that trigger an automated notice or reminder message, we'll have a good address information on file for them. But if you don't have that, that's okay. Here, we'll just enter male or female. At this time, we do not offer a undeclared option, so it'll just have to be male or female. Benefit status, I'm going to enter active. Date of hire, I'm just going to pick first of the month of May. And then notice the next fields related to benefits access and eligibility. Is date of hire before 7/1? I'm going to put no. And before 7/1/2020, no. I anticipate that almost always you'll be answering no to these questions. Just pay attention. There might be a situation where you have an employee who has had no previous uh, uh, elections in your in your platform, and you're just putting them in for the first time, even though they're an existing employee and have been with the company or with the state for a while. That could happen, but I think it's going to be pretty darn rare. For the most part, I think you'll be entering no and no for those. For employment status, I'll enter full-time. Scrolling down to structure, you're going to see that as a trainer, I've got access to all of the locations for education, local government, the whole set. But what I want to do here, I'm just going to select one. Oh, there we go. As a certifying officer or administrator in the Benefitsolver platform, you'll be limited to just the structure groups, just the location that you have access to and that you have the rights to work with those employees. So while I've got this huge list of locations available to me, I would expect and anticipate that you will have a smaller list of locations, probably looking about a half dozen of these. And for me, I'm just going to pick the first one, again, random location for me, but I'm going to pick the first one that has full-time employees. Compensation, if you have compensation information, you can enter it, but it's perfectly acceptable to enter 0. Right now, we're not using this value in any calculations, but at some point in the future, we do expect to begin using that as part of the rate calculations. Again, so if you don't have annual compensation information at this time, perfectly okay to enter 0. Won't hurt anything. If you've got that information though, hey, go ahead and plug that in, and it won't hurt anything that way either, and it may prove nice to have in the future. Okay, payroll frequency, again, fictional employee. I'm not going to worry too much about the details. I'm just going to pick monthly and the 00 monthly for the field, which takes me to the bottom. Again, see how this was quick and easy, and I just did the red asterisk fields. Across the bottom, there are a variety of buttons. In a moment, I'm going to click on the Done button, and that's just going to load this fictional employee into the Benefitsolver database. But there are a couple other buttons I want to mention to you. This one, add another employee. You might find this really helpful. If you have a situation where you've got, say, 5 employees that you need to add one right after another, and then this will be really helpful for you, because when you click add another employee, it will add this employee to the database. It will take you back to the top of the page, and all the fields will be blank. So you can just key them in one right after another, and when you get to the bottom, keep clicking add another employee until you get to the last one, and then click done on the last one. Or if you have some elections that you need to make or adjustment that you need to make to the employee, you could click employee data. So this will take you right to the screen where you can begin editing the elections for this employee if there's some work you need to do there. For me, I'm just going to click done. I'm going to add the employee. And then these last two are specifically available because I'm in a test environment. When you're working in our production environment, you won't see these two buttons there. Log in as member, can't do that in production, and generate test member. We're not going to make fictional people in the production environment. So those are the buttons across the bottom. I'm just going to click on done and add Roy ZZ test. Now let's see, I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to search for last name ZZ test. And let's take a look at the employee I just created, Roy ZZ test. There he is, that's his member record. We'll go into some more detail about what you'll see in a member record in a little bit. But before we do that, I just want to pause for a moment. Kendria, are people starting to ask questions yet?
You know it, Dave. They're coming in. So a couple of things, let's clarify. So as Dave stated earlier, your employees will be preloaded into the system. So you do not have to complete this process for your entire population. What Dave is showing you now is the process for adding your newly hired employees to the system. That's the main one we're getting, Dave. So I did want to set in this. Thank you. I think that's about it.
Yep. Okay. And were people confused about being able to access the system now versus June 1st? I know that's been a thing in the past.
Nope, I think I preemptively caught you and I put something in the chat already, so
super.
We're good there.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, then let's move to the next thing I want to show you. And what I want to show you now is how you will process an employment termination. And I have set up a victim here, an employee here, that we're going to terminate his employment. His name's Steve ZZ Test, and we're going to give him the boot. Okay. So just looking at his member record, you'll see he's got some elections, some general information. He's an active employee, has a spouse, has got elections. They just had a kid, which is kind of rough because it didn't work out. So we're going to let him go. When you're processing an employment termination, process is really straightforward, and there's not a ton that you need to do. Excuse me. So really just watch here the first couple of steps. Locate the member record, make sure you're terminating the employment of the correct person. Once you've found Steve ZZ Test in this case and you've got the right person, then from the action dropdown, I'm just going to pick the first item here in the list. This is the edit term. And you're going to be coming back to this action dropdown for all the things you do as an administrator. You'll be here all the time. And we made the most commonly used one first. So it's just the first item, edit term. Anytime you want to do a transaction where you're making some change to a member record, in this case, an employment termination, this is where you'll go. Find the member, hit edit term from the dropdown. What you're seeing on the screen, a pending transaction, we'll kind of ignore that for the moment. But across the bottom, I'm just going to open up these different options. Each of these is a reason for change that you could use to edit this member record. Now, some of these will be available to the employee, like an employee can do a new hire enrollment. An employee can do most of these life events over here, but you as an administrator will have access to administrator options that the employees will never see. So as an administrator, I found him, I clicked edit term, and I'm just going to come over to the one on the right here, administrator, and I'm going to look for employment termination. That's the menu item that you'll use when you need to process an employment termination. And again, this is all documented, so if you aren't furiously taking notes, that's okay. It'll be all part of the process. You'll be able to see it again easily. Termination reason, you'll need to choose voluntary or involuntary. Now, in the past, maybe this was not as important that we captured it, but under the ARPA rules, it becomes more important that we capture whether it was a voluntary or involuntary employment termination. And I'm just going to say involuntary. He's really getting the boot. What was the last date of employment? Excuse me. For this, I want to stop for a moment and just talk about the rules-based system that we've built. I mentioned the idea before of rules-based system. That is, we put in all the instructions for when you're allowed to elect benefits and what benefits you can get, and when will the coverage start for every election, for every employee, and employer group. All of those rules are built. And so when you're processing an employment termination, I don't want you to overthink it. If you're like, well, I'm terminating his employment today on May 11th, but I want his medical to run through the end of the month, we built that rule. That rule is already in there. So when it's asking for what is the last date of employment, don't overthink it. Just enter in, oh, did you see that? I just put in the letter T and it gave me today's date. Check that out. So I'm just going to enter today's date, and I did it just by entering the letter T. And if you think that's cool, check this out. P, it's moving pretty quick, but the letter P gives you the previous business day, and the letter N gives you the next business day. Pon, if you're listening in, I bet you didn't know that. Look at that. That's the great thing you get when you bring Dave in to do your training. You know shortcuts like that. Okay, today is letter T, and that gives me 5/11/2021. Not overthinking it. I'm going to let the rules govern when each election is going to terminate. I'll click continue. From here on out, super duper easy. We'll scroll down, look at the review enrollment for Steve's easy test, and everything that is changing is highlighted in red. So previously, Steve's easy test did not have a date of termination. Now it will be 5/11. His employment status previously was full-time. Now it's being changed to terminated involuntary. And each of the elections that he had, previously he had been covered and his spouse had been covered. Now those are going to be terminated, and the coverage termination date will be automatically calculated. So if that all looks good, and again, your job here is just to confirm it looks good. If it all looks good, I'm going to click approve. And because Steve was enrolled in a Cobra qualifying coverage, he's going to see the Cobra qualifying event screen. And again, on this screen, you're just confirming it looks good. The Cobra qualifying event was employment termination. Sometimes it could be age out or reduction in hours, etc. This one was employment termination. Date of event is correct. That's the one I entered. The people that were covered and that it applies to are Steve and Stephanie. There's a section for Cobra Subsidy that you should just be able to pass right over and then click next. I get to the confirmation. This confirms that the work has been done. And let's go back and look at that member record, Steve's easy test. Here you'll see the changes that we just made. As we scroll down, you'll see he's now in a terminated status. His date of termination is populated. As we continue looking, you'll see his elections. Previously, he had been enrolled in medical, but now his coverage is terminated. And again, check this out. Even though I told it the last date of employment was 5/11, the system applied the rules correctly to run his medical and prescription drug coverage through the end of the month. So it turns 5/31/2021. So let the system rules control those dates and just enter the date of termination. And then in the Cobra qualifying event section, because Benefitsolver will be administering the Cobra event, this will be just information for you, not necessarily an action item, but there is good information here that our administrators use when we are administering the Cobra for terminated employees. Okay, so we've looked at a couple things. We looked at add employee, and we did a whirlwind look at how to process an employment termination. Kendria, how are we doing on questions?
Hey, Dave, pop it in because I just had one question, hoping that you can show again. So when you're processing an event or termination, people want to know if you could show that T again, what's that mean, and what other shortcuts can you use?
Yeah, let me show you. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm just going to pick another one, administration. Let's see, It's a little bit early to be rehiring him, but we'll just pick one at random. So those shortcuts that I used were the letter T gets you today's date, and the letter P, as in Florence, my last name, P, gets you the previous business day, and the letter N gets you the next business day. So T, man, it moves really quick, but trust me, I punched in the letter T and it gave me today, and the letter P, as in Peter, gets you the previous, and the letter N, as in next, gets you the next business day. And that's a fantastic shortcut. And that's going to work in all the date fields anywhere you're at in Benefitsolver. Are there more?
Yep, I was going to say I'm popping on for just one more date. So just to confirm, Cobra going forward will be processed in Benefitsolver. So yes, as you enter those transactions for terminations, the Cobra QE notice will generate. That is the same thing for dependents who age out at 26. You do not need to do anything. The system will kick out their information and go directly to them. I think that's the bulk of the questions I've seen thus far, Dave.
I'm so glad we have good answers. Aren't those the best answers? Then, yeah, super easy. It's taken care of. That's always a great answer. Okay. We've looked at add an employee and process an employment termination. I want to give you some insight into how you will look at a member record, and I want to do it with this scenario. You need to do research on a situation with a given employee. For example, here, Steve's easy test. This will be a great example for us just to look at a member record. So if an employee comes and says, I have a question, and so you need to quickly research to find out the answer to the question or to research the situation or what has happened, I want to give you some of the highlights of areas that you could look to find the answer to get yourself up to speed. What's going on with this employee? First, locate the member record. So we can do that over here by searching by first name, last name, fragment of the last name, social security number, last four of the social security number. There's a lot of different ways to find the right person. And what's really cool is for the rest of today, the two employees that I have been looking at, the system will remember them all day. So if I go look at something else and I want to come back and see this member record, is right here for me. At any time, I can just jump back to that employee record. Again, these are all fictional people, obviously. So find the employee record, and then here are some highlights. First, you can look at cases. Now, I'm going to show you in a little bit how to make a case for yourself, but know that a case is a note that has been attached to a specific member record. And it can include an attached document. It could include an audio recording of the employee calling in to member services and having a conversation with one of our member service representatives. And it's going to have great information. So right here underneath the member name is a great first stop. If you want to get up to speed on what's going on with an employee, come in and read the case notes. In these case notes, you'll see that he had submitted dependent verification on his spouse, and that dependent verification was approved. I did that right before today's call. And that there was another transaction. He was applying for, he had a birth event and needed to provide the birth certificate for that birth, but he got his employment terminated. So we would be able to terminate close out this case because his employment was terminated. But that's a great stop just to get up to speed what's going on with an employee. And as you are working with employees, I would encourage you to make liberal use of the case manager tool. Create cases and attach notes to the member record so that if another person steps in and needs to cover while you're on vacation, or you have multiple people working with the same group of employees, it's not going to be located in your email, and it's not going to be on a post-it note on your desktop or just in your memory. All of this great information is going to be associated with the member record, so authorized administrators will be able to come in, review the case notes, and quickly be up to speed on everything that's going on with this employee situation. That's a great first stop. Scrolling down, you'll see personal information, in this section, good to note, underneath that employment information, and I would just highlight for you, these fields are a great place to stop and look just to see what's the status of this employee and their employment with state of New Jersey. So what was their date of hire? Is there a date of termination? Is their employment status still full-time or part-time, or is it terminated, voluntary or involuntary? You might just confirm, although I don't expect to see any problems here, but you might take a look at the structure group and just confirm they are where you think they are. You might make a quick note of the dependents, and this helps tremendously as you're looking at who's covered to familiarize yourself. Which one of these is a spouse? Which one of them is a child? You'll see the spouse was Stephanie for Steve's easy test. Steve and Stephanie had a child whom I named Stephanie in honor of the two of them. And then scrolling down, I want to highlight for you, the next section is election information current. And the reason I make a big deal pausing here is you need to pay close attention to the header of each section, because in some situations you'll have more than one set of elections displaying associated with a member record. In this instance, we just have election information current, but during annual enrollment, you might also have a section with a header that says election information future. And earlier at the start of the phone call before I terminated employment, we had two sections on this member record. We had election information current and another section, election information pending verification. So pay close attention to those headers, because if you see two medical elections, you'll see from the header which one is current and which one is pending verification, or which one is current and which one is a future election made during annual enrollment. And that'll help you keep your place as you're looking at the elections. Scrolling down, there's Cobra qualifying event information for terminated employees. If you needed to know that information, it's available. Okay, so that's going to give you a great overview. Case notes, huge. Review the case notes quickly. Check employment status. Look and see what elections are made and whether they're in the current or pending or future sections. Still need to do more research. Super, I got more information for you. For this, I'm going to go to the action menu drop down, and I'm going to choose the second most commonly used item, which is history. History is an amazing window into every transaction that has edited this member record. So here's Steve's easy test history, and what you're seeing on screen in these rows, each row is a transaction that has in some way edited this member record. And I can just click on the most recent one that you watch me do, the employment termination. What will come up is a wealth of information about that transaction. It includes when did I do that transaction? When was it completed? Was it a manual process or the result of imported information? What reason for the change did I give? I gave employment termination. When was that effective and who completed that change? For every transaction that edits a member record anywhere in Benefitsolver, all of this information is available to you, the administrator, for your employees. Scrolling down, there's even more great information. For every transaction that edits a member record, we keep track of every field in the database that was touched by that transaction. And for that field, we keep track of both the before and after value in that field in the database. So in the transaction where I terminated employment, each row here is a field of the database that was edited as a result of that transaction. And you can see most here, the before value was blank and the after value is populated, employment termination. Date of termination coming down to the medical election, you'll see the status formerly was active and he had an election, employee and spouse, changed to status term and blanked out those fields. Here, the termination, he was marked covered yes, now he's covered no with the date of termination populated. Likewise for Stephanie. Her information also updated, and scrolling down, you'll see the same for the prescription drug. and you saw there were about half a dozen transactions that have touched this member record, you can scroll back in time just by the next and previous buttons. You can go back and look at the prior transaction and the one before that and the one before that, all the way back. Or you could come out here and click on them in this view as well. This is tremendously helpful if you're doing research on an employee's election situation and you want to know, how did they get here? What has happened with this member record? You can just read through the history of the transactions and see what has happened. That's pretty powerful stuff, but there's an even better, faster way. Suppose you're interested in one specific medical election. You can use the history buttons next to each section to see what has happened with that section. Now, the history buttons are these green circles down the right side. And if you really squint and look close, you'll see it's a clock with a counterclockwise arrow going around, and that's the history button. So if I wanted to know, well, what happened that his employer or that his medical coverage is terminated, I'll click the history button and it will load up each transaction that edited the medical election on this employee record. It looks like there's 3 of them here. The most recent one is on screen. It was the employment termination. And here's a little hyperlink. If I click this screen should look familiar. It's the exact same view that I was looking at before. Or I can go back in time and say, well, what was it before that? Well, here we had a verification update. This is where I approved Stephanie ZZ Test and her dependent verification. And the one before that is when I first added the new hire enrollment transaction. So that's another great tool that you can use to go back and see the history of each transaction that has touched this specific section of the database, or in this case, this specific election. And again, you can just click on the name of the transaction and it will bring up that full detail screen. So tons of great stuff out here for looking at history and researching member records. There's one more thing I want to show you before I turn it over to Pawn. I want to show you how to create a case on an employee record. From here, I'll just go back to the admin home screen. Now, because a case is a note associated with a specific member, my strong advice is go find that employee record first and then attach a case to it. It's not necessarily it's not the only way you can do cases, but that would be my advice, and that's what I would recommend. As you look at the screen, here I'm logged in as an administrator, you'll see over on the right side here a slider widget. This thing jumps out and back in, that's why we call it the slider widget, and it's got tabs on it, but you'll notice there is no briefcase icon tab. Because we're on the admin home, we're not seeing the cases tab on the widget. But when I go back to Roy ZZ Test, he's the new hire I just added, and I'm looking at a specific member record, now I'm seeing the briefcase icon in the slider widget. That means if you want to create a case for a specific member record and attach it to that employee record, go find that employee record and then click the briefcase icon. When you do it this way, the system knows, hey, when you create this case, associate it with the open member record. Super easy that way. Again, not the only way you can create a case, but this would be how I would do it, and I recommend that you do this because it's so straightforward, so easy. Find the member record, click the briefcase icon, and it opens up the case. Likewise, if you were editing an existing case, it's going to open in the same window. You'd find the member record, edit that existing case. It'll open in the slider widget here. Creating a member record, creating a case is really straightforward. You're just going to go down and hit the red asterisk fields. The first thing you choose is the reason disposition. You can browse through these and see the different reasons that we've given here. And I would say pick the one that is the best fit, familiarize yourself with them. It's not a huge high pressure, but it's nice to have an accurate reflection. I'm just going to click on AE and new hire. So it'll be, information and new hire. And again, it's a fictional example, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. For a status, the 3 most common statuses that you'll see in use are action needed, working, and resolved. Now you can use any of the statuses out here, but those are the three most common. And for this one, I'm going to create the case as an action needed case. So let's pretend Roy's Easy Test has come to me seeking information about new hire, and I didn't know the answer, so it's a realistic scenario, and I needed to pose that question to Pawn Johnson. You'll see the due date defaults to 1 week. You can change that if you need to. Then there's an assigned to field, and I'm just going to pick Pawn Johnson. I'm going to send her an action needed case. The originating source, we'll say it was a note. I'm just going to say that Roy's Easy Test walked up to me and asked me the question. And now this is one that I probably ought to be able to answer, but we'll just pose that question to Pawn. And there is an option here. If I had a file associated with this that I have an electronic copy, something Roy's Easy Test has submitted, something I want to associate with his member record, I would just click on File and choose File and go locate that electronic copy in my directory. I don't have anything to share this time, so I'll just leave it off and then click Submit. Now, if I've correctly hit all of the red asterisk fields, it will submit that case. And when the page refreshes, you'll see here in the cases section, there's my new case, assigned to Pawn Johnson in an action needed status. And let me just refresh his name up here. Now he gets a little post-it note icon, a red circle with exclamation point. And somewhere out there, Pawn Johnson just received an email notification letting her know that she has an action needed case assigned to her. And when she logs into the administrator screen, that'll show up on her homepage, letting her know she's got action she needs to take. So you're welcome, Pawn. And that's a brand new case for you. Let's pause for a moment before I turn the reins over to Pawn for the next topic and invite Kendria back. Kendria, how are we doing on questions?